everybody, and welcome back to my channel. Today I would like to talk about some books that are good for new fantasy readers. And I don't mean new fantasy readers as in from other genres, I mean like people who are new to the world. So my sister just had a baby, and while that is very exciting, it also brings back a ton of nostalgia and a ton of those kind of bittersweet feelings of reading with my kids and spending time with them when they were really little. I think it is the dream of everyone who's a reader to have a kid who is also a reader, and there are tons of benefits to reading to your kids in terms of social development, language development, in terms of family bonding. It is just overall a great activity, recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics and everyone ever, basically. So reading to your kids is a great idea. And obviously, I feel silly even having to put this as a disclaimer, but obviously we want our kids to read what they like. And this is not about pushing a certain genre on your kids or anything like that. It is about acknowledging the fact that when you are a parent, there are certain books that you will have to read, and this is not an exaggeration, 20,000 times, because your kids will just want to read them over and over and over. And if we can populate their bookshelves from a young age with books that are fun for us to read as well as fun for them to listen to, then I think that can be a sanity saver when you are a parent. So fantasy is my favorite genre to read. So when I was shopping for books for my kids, which was between like 6 and 7 years ago, I guess I was probably shopping for them like 7 to 8 years ago now because they're both about to turn 6 and 7. These are the books that I found that I really liked, and what's more, the books that I found my kids turning to over and over and wanting to read. So these are the books to put in the hands of your kid or to read to your child when they're a baby or a toddler to help spark that love of fantasy. What do you want to do in the playroom?
We will read books.
What do you want to do all the time?
Read books.
What's your favorite thing to do?
Read books.
Which book do you want to read?
No, I read book.
And this is not a comprehensive list, but these are some titles that I really enjoyed and thought that my kids really enjoyed, and so wanted to share with you guys. There are a couple of picture books that I thought that I would start with that are very simple, have gorgeous illustrations, and fit that kind of fantasy feeling. The first series that I want to recommend is called Gossi and Friends, and it is a charming, beautiful little series about a family of ducks who are kind of siblings and cousins and friends who go on adventures together. And this is fantastical in the way that all children's books are fantastical, where there are animals that are, moving and living out adventures. But the artwork is subdued and beautiful. The stories are simple yet rich. And in my opinion, they're very easy to read over and over. I have read these hundreds of times and I never really got bored of them. The next picture book, and this is a picture book series that is kind of taken over. If you can make it through a baby shower or new baby gift giving without getting one of these books, then I am impressed. But it is one of the Usborne That's Not My series. And if you are a parent or someone who has shopped for kids books, then you probably know what I mean. But it's this series of little books that have interactive elements. So you can kind of touch the material on the inside and it will either be soft or scratchy or fuzzy or smooth, and it teaches babies and toddlers about those textures. And there are a whole range of these, from That's Not My Goat to That's Not My Cow, but there are also some pretty cool fantasy related ones like That's Not My Unicorn or That's Not My Dragon. And I thought it was fun to just give my babies access to those kinds of pictures and those kinds of creatures, and they really loved it. We had the That's Not My Dragon one until it completely fell apart. So they definitely love these. Babies love anything that they can touch and feel on their skin, anything that crinkles and makes noise. So this is a fantastic series for anybody and makes a great first book for lots of babies. The pictures are bright and high contrast, which works really well when kids are younger. And the benefits of reading to your baby start immediately. They don't have to be old enough to understand or anything like that. The bonding benefits and those types of social benefits start immediately. Another series that I really liked for small babies in terms of those little board books is there's been a series of classics that have kind of been condensed and put out for babies and toddlers. And that includes things like Pride and Prejudice, Romeo and Juliet. There's a ton of them that they have released, but the one that we had that we loved was a copy of the Jabberwocky. And this nonsense poem is fun for all ages. It's a great one to do like silly voices and be really animated with. And again, because it's geared towards toddlers, the book is short, the poem is condensed, the pictures are really bright, and they have that kind of high contrast between the picture and the background. And this is one that both my kids loved, and we read over and over and over, and definitely fits that kind of fantasy element for a board book. So those are some of the board books that I really loved and I felt like could start to make a love for fantasy bloom in your kid's heart. The next kind of category as you graduate from reading board books into reading longer children's stories are the picture books that come from the section, the kind of age 3 to 5 section in the bookstore. And this is where the stories start to kind of blossom. They follow, they have narrative structure. There are characters. There are things that the people in these books are doing. And again, while I stress that any book is a good book, whether it's, a Paw Patrol book that has just been published based on the TV show, or if there's a character that your kid loves, those are all great. But these are some of the fantasy-oriented books that I loved reading with my kids and that I felt like were really unique and really enjoyable. The first is the story Zog by Julia Donaldson. So Julia Donaldson is really well known for her story The Gruffalo, which is also a great book, one that I totally recommend. But that one is really well known, and I feel like Zog, one of her other stories, is not as well known. So Zog follows the story of a dragon who is going to dragon training school. And as a part of dragon training school, he needs to finish all of these quests and get graded on these different tasks that he needs to complete. So he has to do certain things like learn to fly, learn to raid a castle. There's lots of things that he has to do. And in this story, he meets a princess. And what I really loved about this one is that it's actually the character of the princess is not at all the character that you expect. Julia Donaldson completely flips that common stereotype of a princess in a fantasy story and turns it into something totally different. As a mom to a daughter, because my daughter is the older of my two children, and she is the one who owned this book first. And as a mom who is a doctor, there is a really fun twist in this book that I really love, and I have purchased this one for all of my friends who have been expecting, and it is a children's book that I totally love. I love The Gruffalo, but I think Zog might be my favorite book of Julia Donaldson. The next fantasy picture book that I would recommend is a classic. I'm sure everybody grew up reading it, but it is so good that I feel like it still needs to be mentioned in this video. And that is Where the Wild Things Are by Maurice Sendak, I think is his name. I mean, it's so well known that you just know it. You don't even need to know who wrote it, but everybody can kind of picture those iconic monsters from the cover, and I think everybody has a basic idea of what this is about. But essentially, Where the Wild Things Are is about a little boy who is acting out, and his mom sends him to his room with no supper, and from there, within his imagination, a totally new world grows. Now, I could probably spend way too much time analyzing Where the Wild Things Are from a psychological perspective and, why certain things happen in this story and what makes them so interesting from a child development perspective. But if you kind of ignore all of that subtext, this is just a really fun kid's story. The illustrations are very striking. This is a book that has stood the test of time. It has been around forever. And the story itself is very... is very pure in narrative structure. It is your classic adventure story. It is super engaging, even for small kids. This is a great transition from board books to picture books for little kids because the story is very strong and it is profound, but it is told with minimal numbers of words. The story is not bogged down by excessive text. And children's authors who can create these beautiful, long-lasting stories through the use of minimal sentences and through, just the pictures and the words complementing each other perfectly, that is such a difficult skill. But what has been done with Where the Wild Things Are is something really unique and really difficult to pull off, and that is why it is a classic. But I loved reading this to my kids. They loved listening to it. They still ask to listen to it now sometimes, and we have kind of graduated onto novels, but they still love to go back to those classics. So this one I totally recommend. I have another princess book that is coming up next, and if I can find it, I will just splice in a little video of my daughter reading. She had memorized this book when she was younger. She was not reading it, but she listened to this one so often that she could kind of recite it word for word.
A strong horse, a big real warth horse. My told this, but they didn't get it quite right.
And this one is called The Princess and the Pony by Kate Beaton. And this follows a young girl who wants a warrior's horse for her birthday. So she's a princess and she wants a real warrior's horse for her birthday so that she can take place in this big warrior competition. And her parents buy her a pony and they don't get what she wanted quite right. And it's following her kind of misadventures with this pony as she tries to join into this warriors competition. And the artwork is really beautiful. The story, it is definitely a modern children's story. It is quirky. It is a lot different than those classic stories that you read like Harold or Where the Wild Things Are, but it is fantastic. I absolutely loved it. My kids both loved it. My daughter especially. It was one of her favorites for a really long time, and I would highly recommend it to anyone who loves fantasy, who loves, if you need a story with a strong female character in it, who loves quirky animal companions. It is a great picture book to get started with. And finally, I'm going to chat about my son's favorite picture series, and that is a series that is called George's Excellent Adventures. They have written this series about a young boy named George who goes on adventures through time, from different places around the globe. And the first one won a couple of literary awards. It was called Spaghetti with the Yeti, and he goes on an adventure to find the Yeti. George has kind of varied interests, and each one is highlighted through each of the different books. My kids love all of them, but my son especially. He would sleep with these books in his room under his pillow. He would ask to read all of them in a row. We would just spend like an hour going through all of the George books. And one of our very favorites is called Donuts for Dragons. So they always pair kind of a mythological creature with a snack food. So there's spaghetti for the Yeti, donuts for dragons, muffins for mummies, jelly beans for giants. There's a ton of them, and they're all really fun. The writing, it rhymes, and the stories are these kind of feel-good adventures, and because of, I think, the included junk food, they're really appealing to kids, and my kids both love them, but my son especially, and I would highly recommend this series to anyone who's trying to build up a library for their future fantasy lover. The last category that I wanted to touch on here were some books that we used as a transition for our kids moving from picture books into longer stories and novels. We started really early with my daughter. She has a much better attention span than her brother. He is very wiggly, very on the go. It is difficult for him to stay still for longer periods of time. So he is turning 6 soon, and it's only in the last year really that he has had the ability to sit down for longer periods of time. But our daughter has been kind of able to do that since she was about 3 or so. They have different personalities. They're interested in different things. Since my son was 3, you could put him down with some Legos and he could build them for hours on end, kind of hyper focused in on that, but it's different for all of them. But these are some of the books that we use to transition both of them from picture books into longer stories. The first 2 are shorter novels, or novels that are kind of broken up into selections. The first of which is Winnie the Pooh. So Winnie the Pooh, classic children's story. I'm sure we've all read various like golden books or picture books, and we've all seen the TV shows or the movies, but I feel like a lot fewer people have actually sat down and read the novelizations. So Winnie the Pooh and the House on Pooh Corner are the 2 kind of novelizations of Winnie the Pooh that are made up really of a series of short stories, some of which have connections to the others. And these are a fantastic place to start if you're trying to transition your little one from reading picture books into reading novels, and especially novels that have that kind of fantastical element. These books are beautiful. There's a reason that they're a classic, but I will warn you that they are emotionally very difficult to read as a parent. I have read both of them multiple times to both of my kids, and the end of The House at Pooh Corner has never failed to make me cry. So if you are going to read them to your kids, I think it will make you cry. If you find it at all difficult to deal with nostalgia, your kids growing up, if you find yourself looking back at old pictures of them and feeling like the time passed in the blink of an eye, then I guarantee you that The House on Pooh Corner will make you cry. I don't know how it couldn't, but it is a fantastic first story. They're funny, and they're funny in a way that's really appealing to kids. My kids laughed their way through both of these books, and I think that they're a fantastic place to start. The next one that I think is a good transition novel is Fortunately the Milk by Neil Gaiman. So Neil Gaiman is the most versatile author that I know. He writes children's books, he has written picture books, he's written children's novels, he's written middle grade, he's written adult, like he can do anything, and he does all of them very well in my opinion. Some of his kids' books are a little darker, like The Graveyard Book and Coraline. We haven't personally gotten to that point with our kids yet. All kids are ready for different stories at different times. But Fortunately the Milk is a story that I think a kid can enjoy at any age. It's very short. There are tons of beautiful illustrations, and it is a silly, quirky story that my kids love. We have read this book probably between 10 and 15 times. My kids used to play a Fortunately the Milk like imaginative game when they were finished, where they would be various characters in the story. And the overall plot is that you follow this dad who goes to the store to pick up milk for his kids, and on his way home he is abducted by aliens along with the bottle of milk. And so begins a series of misadventures where he kind of races through time and across different places with some companions along the way, trying to get home in time to bring his kids this milk for breakfast. So it is a wonderful story. Neil Gaiman, in my opinion, has one of the richest imaginations of any writer who is working today. And this is my favorite book of his for young children. The next are a couple of series that we moved on to kind of after those introductory novels. The first one was one that I had introduced to my kids purely out of nostalgia for when I read it as a kid, and that is the Dragonling series, which is kind of one of those early reader books for young kids that have a lot of pictures, not as much text, and it follows a young boy who finds a dragon, a little dragonling. So in this boy's society, they grow up hunting dragons, and he just wants to be old enough to go out with his dad and his older brother and go on a dragon hunt. So he sneaks after them one day, and once the hunt is finished, he's kind of poking around the dragon's body and finds a baby dragon. And this baby dragon imprints on him and tries to follow him home. And it's about him starting to fall in love with this dragon, basically to come to care for this dragon, to want to protect this dragon, which puts him at odds with his society and his family because they fear dragons and they feel that they need to go out and hunt them to protect themselves. So it can be a little a little much for kids to see. There is a mom dragon, obviously, who is killed in this hunt. So you need to be able to judge your own children and know if they're ready for a topic like that. But otherwise, it's a really heartwarming story. It's very basic in its setup, but it just shows the power of friendship and how that can change people's views and change traditions that have been with your people for a long time that potentially need to be changed. So my kids really enjoyed this one. I think there are 6 books in that series, and I think it's a really fun kind of starter novel to spark a love of dragons for sure. Next, I just want to talk about a couple of classic novels that I felt were really great for my kids and that I enjoyed when I was young as well. And that would be The Trumpet of the Swan and Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. So again, I mean, these kind of toe the line of fantasy. They have animals that can talk, which, you know, definitely is fantastical, but they also focus on stories of real kids and their lives and what happens to them. But I think that E.B. White is a fantastic writer for children. There are definitely throwaway lines that don't stand the test of time. And when we read to our kids, I will sometimes skip a line, or if I think that something doesn't really fit the context of the world that we live in right now, or doesn't really add up with the values that we have as a family, I either talk to my kids about it and why I don't think that it's appropriate anymore, or I kind of change the wording a little bit as I'm reading through to kind of fit the message that we're trying to send to our kids. But I don't think that having some of these lines that make you uncomfortable to read kind of reduces the value of the rest of the story. I think that both of these books are still fantastic for younger kids. They're written beautifully. They have, again, like, these are classics for a reason. E.B. White had a fantastic way of writing for children without talking down to children. Charlotte's Web deals again with some pretty heavy topics such as death. My kids were unfortunate in the fact that they had a family death at a relatively young age. So that was a topic that they had no choice but to become familiar with. And I think that processing those kinds of emotions through reading is really healthy and is a really good way to open up conversations with your kids and help them process some feelings that they might not know what to do with, and to help them see that there is hope after things like that happen. So Charlotte's Web was a particularly powerful book for our family and one that our kids loved so much. And The Trumpet of the Swan was one of my favorite books as a young kid, and both of my kids really enjoyed that as well. The final series that I want to chat about is called Pip Bartlett's Guide to Magical Creatures, and it's written by Maggie Stiefvater, who is a fairly well-known young adult fantasy author. She wrote the Raven Boy Cycle, which is probably her most popular book series. And this series follows a young girl named Pip Bartlett who has the ability to hear magical creatures. So in her world, there are regular pets like dogs and cats, but there are also magical creatures such as griffins and unicorns and some more that Maggie Stiefvater has just made up for her universe. They are illustrated and they are really, really fun. Again, this is kind of an entry-level novel. I think probably if kids are reading it on their own, I think it will probably be aimed at like the 6 to 8 age category. We read it a little younger than that because I was reading it with my kids. They weren't reading it to me, but they both loved it. The magical creatures are so fun, and I think it helps to harness a love for those magical sidekicks and animal companions and those elements of fantasy that are really appealing to little kids. I think animal companions are kind of the gateway into fantasy for a lot of readers. They definitely were for me, and my kids absolutely adore this series. There are 3 books out as of right now. I think it's Pip Bartlett's Guide to Magical Creatures, Pip Bartlett's Guide to Unicorn Training, and Pip Bartlett's Guide to Sea Monsters, and they're all fantastic. It is such a fun series, and both my kids really enjoyed it. So those are the books that I feel were very fantasy oriented, that I really enjoyed reading to my kids and could read to them over and over, and books that they really enjoyed listening to. If you are expecting, if you have a little one in your life, or if you have family members that you need to buy gifts for, I think these are great introductions to fantasy for any child and would bring a lot of happiness in terms of reading experience. If you have any favorite favorite fantasy related books that you read with your kids or with other members of your family. I would love to hear them, and I will see you with another video soon. Bye.